Welcome back, adventurers. Today we're going to go a little bit out of the predetermined scheduling. Today's episode was supposed to be on all of the different classes, and I'm not going to be doing that. And the reason for that is I wanted to give you guys a little bit more information and go just a little bit more in depth on all of the classes. So they're all going to have their own individual episodes so that you don't have to, just scroll your way through one really long video. You can pick the video for whatever class you want to make, watch it, and follow along in character creation. But there are a couple things that I want you to know going into those episodes. The first one is going to be ability scores, what each one is and what each one does. And I'm going to follow that up with the skills. That way you know what each skill roughly represents. Some DMs change a couple things here and there, but for the most part, all the skills represent the same things across the board. So we'll touch on that a little bit as well. So that way when it comes time to pick your class and start building your character, you know what you're doing at least a little bit more. So there is 6 ability scores. There's strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. Let's start off with teaching you how to calculate your ability score modifier. Let's start off with saying all of your ability scores are 10. That means your modifier is plus 0. However, if you get your ability score up to 12, it becomes plus 1. So 10 and 11, plus 0. 12, 13, plus 1. 14, 15 can be plus 2. 16, 17 are going to be plus 3. 18, 19, plus 4. And 20 makes it plus 5. And that's all well and good, but it does also work in the opposite direction. So 9 and 8 is going to be minus 1. 7 and 6 minus 2. 5 and 4 minus 3. 3 and 2 minus 4. 1 minus 5. And it can't be 0. If certain things hit 0, you just immediately go unconscious for the most part. But we'll touch on that later. That's not something you need to know. That's special mechanics within combat. So we'll touch that on that in a later episode. Now, strength is going to determine how hard you hit something with a melee attack. There's more to that, but we'll touch on that in skills. For now, we'll just go over the combat orientation for all of these stats, for the most part. Dexterity is going to govern whether or not you hit something with a ranged attack, as well as how much damage you do with said ranged attack. Constitution determines how much health you have. And then intelligence determines how much information you have and how well you retain said information. Wisdom is going to govern how well you can apply the information you currently have. And then charisma is going to determine how well you talk to people, which those last 3 can be super important outside of combat, especially if you're trying to avoid combat. Alright, so there's a whopping 18 skills. And we're going to get into those in just a second. But first, each individual skill has its own ability score that corresponds with it. What that means is that when you do a skill check, you'll roll your d20, and then whatever it lands on, you'll add the ability score modifier for whatever ability score corresponds with it. So, for instance, the first skill we're going to go over is going to be acrobatics, which is going to be jumping from one thing to another thing. And that's governed by dexterity. So, if you've got a plus 2 to dexterity, you roll a 12 on your d20, that's a 14. Assuming you're not proficient in this skill, which we'll get into that in classes. Then the second skill is going to be animal handling, which is governed by wisdom. And it's going to be exactly as it sounds, how well you handle animals. By that I mean you can use it to attempt to tame wild animals. You can use it to attempt to help citizens who have lost control of their animals, be it farm animals or pets alike. It doesn't really matter. Then we're going to go into Arcana. Arcana can get a little bit tricky. A lot of people think, oh, okay, well, somebody's using magic, I can use Arcana to try and figure out what that magic is. And yeah, kinda. Sometimes, depending on your DM. Depending on whether or not you're magically inclined. Because it's governed by intelligence, it's going to be checking on whether or not you would even know that information. Which, if you're a barbarian, that's only lived out in the wild with your tribe, chances are you haven't seen a whole lot of magic. So you're probably not going to know what it is no matter how high you roll. But that's going to be up to the DM. I know I like to use Arcana for people to be able to tell whether or not an item is magical or a structure is magical. Then we're going to go into Athletics. Athletics is governed by Strength, which makes sense because it's how quickly you can run, how long you can run, or how quickly and how well you can like climb up something. Usually trees, sometimes walls. Then we go into Deception, which I'm sure you can guess is governed by Charisma. And that's, honestly, it's super simple. It's how well you can lie to somebody. Then we're going to go into History. Now, History is a lot like Arcana. It's intelligence-based, so it's how well you can recall information that you may or may not have about a certain ruin or city or whatever historical topic that's being talked about in the session. Which, once again, if it's not something that your character would have run into in their backstory, chances are it doesn't matter how high you roll. So you need to keep that in mind on any intelligence skills, because they're all going to be based off of how you would have that information. So keep your backstory in mind. Then we're going to go into Insight. Insight is governed by Wisdom, and it's essentially just how well you read people. It's going to, depending on how well you roll, it's going to tell you whether the person's lying to you, whether their intentions are as they say they are. So whether their intentions are good or bad. And that's really all there is to Insight. Then we've got Intimidation. Now, as a skill, I love Intimidation. However, I hate the ability modifier that goes with it. According to the character sheet, the ability score modifier that goes with Intimidation is Charisma. However, if you ask me, I'm going to be a lot more scared of the giant muscly barbarian yelling in my face than the smooth and suave bard talking to me. So I tend to, at my table at least, instead of using Charisma, I use Strength for Intimidation. Now that doesn't really matter right now. What does matter is the character sheet says it's Charisma, so it's Charisma. I hate that, but it is what it is. Moving on. Next, we've got Investigation. Investigation is governed by Intelligence, and it's going to be, instead of recalling information like most other intelligence checks, it's going to be how well you can gather information from the area around you. You're looking for broken branches. You're looking for scuff marks from like moved tables or moved bookshelves. You're investigating the room, trying to find a secret room or a secret hatch, anything. That's Investigation, gathering information from your surroundings. Then we've got Medicine. Medicine's going to be a Wisdom check. And it's going to be like, okay, how do I put this bandage on, right? It's going to be, how is this medicine going to make this person better? Will a potion work on this person? Is this person dead or just comatose? Stuff like that. Then we've got Nature. Nature is going to be, okay, well, I've got this mushroom that I just picked up off the ground. Can I eat it? Is it safe to eat? Yes or no? That's pretty much all a Nature check is. There's more to it, really, but I haven't seen Nature checks really come into play too often, and when they do, they can usually be done with something else as well. Then we've got Perception. Now, Perception is a weird one because it's very similar to Investigation, because you're actively trying to perceive things around you. The most common thing you'll use your Perception for is you'll do a Perception check if you are the first or second watch. If you're staying and doing watch for camping at night, for the long rests out in the wilderness. And you'll do an active Perception to see if you hear any disturbances, you see something out in the distance just outside your campfire light, stuff like that. You've got a passive Perception, but it's usually fairly low because it's just 10 plus your Wisdom modifier. So unless you're a Wisdom-based character, you're not going to have a high passive Perception. And then there's Performance. Performance is going to be Charisma-based, and it's going to be how well you perform play an instrument. Dance, perform for a crowd to try and make money or distract guards, stuff like that. Then we got Persuasion, which is, once again, Charisma. And it really is just how well you talk to somebody. You're trying to persuade somebody into doing something for you or giving you information that you want. Stuff like that. Super simple. Then we've got religion. Religion is another one of those intelligence-based checks where you're just recalling information about certain religions that you may or may not have. Then we've got sleight of hand. Sleight of hand is going to be how well you can steal stuff without getting caught. Whether it's grabbing it off the table and throwing it into your pocket or your pouch before anybody notices, or pickpocketing people, it's going to be a sleight of hand check, which is governed by dexterity. And then we go into stealth, which most times goes hand in hand with sleight of hand. Stealth is going to be how well you're hiding, whether or not people can notice you. If nobody's actively looking for you, you're going to be doing a stealth check against an NPC's passive perception, which, as I recently said, is going to be fairly low. So stealthing is a great thing to do before you do your sleight of hands check, especially since they're both dexterity based. You already know what you're adding to your stealth. And then the final one is survival. Survival is a little wonky. For the most part, it's basically just tracking animals, tracking monsters. You find their tracks and you follow it. And you're following them to their lair or whatever. That's the gist of survival. Some DMs use it for other things. But to me, all of the other things that you would use survival for just fall under nature and medicine. So you don't really need to couple it with survival. But that's all the stats, that's all the skills, that's all the ability scores. If you've got any questions whatsoever, please feel free to ask in the comments below. I will do a short to answer your questions, as well as comment to answer the questions. And next video, we're going to be going over the Barbarian. I love it. I've only made a couple Barbarians, but they're so much fun. So I hope you're looking forward to that just as much as I am.